How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is the next chapter of my book, Reform or Ruin. It's called A Little Background to the Near Future. Obviously, I can't see into the future with any more certainty than anyone else, but certain trends seem to me to be very clear. How they change our world is not so clear. However, it doesn't matter where I look. In terms of people and their respective abilities, we have the makings of a massive divide. There have always been divisions between generations, but the current division is not just a matter of attitudes, although that is blatantly apparent, but it is more a matter of inherent abilities. We undoubtedly have, on the one hand, a generation growing up that is appallingly ill-educated, while we also have a generation of incredibly smart people who are busy redefining our world in ways we can scarcely grasp, even now, although we should be able to see the beginnings. We have the barely literate and the super literate, and probably a bunch of totally confused people in between. Where's this heading? To a situation where one part of humanity can no longer recognize and relate to another part? And if that partition hardens, what then? A super race on the one hand and an underclass of epsilons on the other? And where would that lead? To the destruction of one class by the other? Or the separation of the classes so that the underclass can't interfere with the superclass? I can't see the epsilons being used this time round as slaves. Why bother? We can create machine slaves which would be more useful and much less trouble. Would the underclass be wiped out as an unnecessary burden? Who knows? However, in the realm of government and representation, we are looking at a very difficult situation. What about business? We are about to see the breaking down of the age-old attitude to life that has been based around the need to work, either simply for survival or to earn a living to pay for that survival. Is that need coming to an end? Probably not, but that way of life is heading for a massive change. Indeed, for a significant segment of society, traditional work for wages is certainly about to change drastically, and we are talking about that change taking place within the next 5 to 10 years. If it is, what are those people going to do to justify their existence? Are they to be kept, and if so, how? And will those who are keeping them be happy with that arrangement? Is government preparing for these imminent changes? If so, there is certainly no sign of any preparations. Another aspect to this particular problem is the philosophical problems this condition will usher in. How will people who have no need to work and no need to earn a living pass their new lives? Will they adjust to a life of leisure? Or will they get easily bored? Will they head down the road of disillusionment? Are we going to need a new religion to cope with this situation, a new kind of medicine, a new kind of environment? These, of course, are weighty questions, and this decade appears to be turning out to be a decade of big questions. On the other side of the business divide, there are the multi-billion-dollar companies, and increasingly the trillion-dollar companies. These companies are starting to rival governments and nation-states. Several companies already have a capital value equivalent to some of the world's largest national economies. Is a showdown between companies and governments on the horizon? In this respect, it can't have gone unnoticed that some companies are at the moment seeking to issue their own currencies. Will that strike a direct blow to governments? Or will the way money is used change drastically over the course of this decade? And that latter question takes us neatly into another realm. Let me mention just two expensive ongoing projects. Up until recently, major projects have only been undertaken by the governments of the largest economies on the globe. The most obvious of these projects is what has come to be known as the space race. What has happened over the course of the last decade is that governments have increasingly taken a back seat as more nimble and smart companies have jumped ahead in space technology, leaving enterprises like NASA having to use the technology of upstart companies like SpaceX. There are several space exploration companies putting their mark on the subject and leaving the government enterprises far, far behind. Another such example is the advance in the development of fusion technology. The most advanced government pilot is expected to take another 15 years to be able to show a working module, whereas a private company claims it will have its prototype working by 2025, 10 years ahead of the multi-government project. This leads me to wonder if governments aren't seeking to operate in inappropriate areas, and they need to redefine themselves and what they should be doing. As we go through these arguments, I shall be suggesting other areas where governments are increasingly being sidelined. One of the most mismanaged areas of government is their attitude to the money supply. Governments behave like teenagers presented with their first credit card. One of the most important areas requiring a total rethink concerns the control of the money supply. This should be taken out of the control of politicians simply because they can't be trusted to manage money. In this respect, we need look no further than the USA. This is the most wealthy country on the planet, with the largest economy, top-class industries, and some of the smartest people in the world. And yet this country is headed by a president that a whole slew of people heralded with the unbelievably surreal comment that, quote, "At last we have an adult in the White House," unquote. He is, of course, suffering from the advanced stages of Alzheimer's. In a normal world, no one would accept it as believable, yet that's the way things are. And the current administration doesn't seem able to work out how they can now get rid of him. The obvious course would be to have him certified, and the vice president take over. Only the current vice president has hardly any more brain power than the president. And then there is the new world of distributed networks. How are blockchains going to change the way we live, work, and interact with each other? This is a vast subject and could well end up stretching into every aspect of our lives, even the way we end up by governing ourselves. The solutions we can see on the horizon seem like some dream of the future, but this is real. Blockchains are the ultimate way of getting rid of the middlemen who add nothing to an enterprise. In that respect, we're about to see whether blockchain currencies can do better than government-controlled fiat currencies. Since the Federal Reserve has had control over the fate of the US dollar, that's since 1913, that currency has lost nearly 98% of its value. Hardly a resounding success. And if we look at any of the other currencies around the world, we will find a similar history. In fact, very few currencies even survive for very long before they have to be brought in for a service or are thrown out altogether. In a similar vein, one problem that looms horribly large is the alarming way in which our freedoms are being ruthlessly curtailed. Problems, we aren't short of them. What we need is solutions. The current crop of politicians, far from finding solutions, seem hell-bent on creating more problems. We'll have a closer look into that next week. Until then, ta-ra for now. Thank you for watching.